Welcome back to the Parc Fermé. We got a lot to talk about. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now!
AKA Negative Camber. Tonight, for your kind consideration, we're going to review the British Grand Prix. You know how we do this.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
That's exactly what we do. But before doing any of that, I have to introduce my guest tonight, which of course means...
Wrecked from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy.
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
Paul, welcome to the show. Right up front, my friend. A winner at Lime Rock, Paul. You and the Heart of Racing won this weekend at Lime Rock. I know it was a rain shortened, but you know, that happens. And you got to be prepared for anything. And you guys took the top step of the podium. You guys must be elated to win the GTD class win at IMSA.
We certainly are. Yeah, it was rain short. We were I was upset about it because we actually had a really good car all weekend. And we were leading, and that's why, if you're leading and the rain stops the race, then that's better. So it's always better to lead than be following.
Yeah, right.
And but we had a great car. We got pole position. We led from the outset. The only time we lost the lead was during a pit stop where someone hadn't pitted yet. And other than that, we were, everything came good from the very beginning of the weekend, and we made the most of it. And now we're leading 3 championships at this point: the sprint, the overall, and some other one.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was everyone did a great job. I mean, yeah, the car was just dialed in. I mean,
yeah.
And,
well, testament to your crew. I mean, all the mechanics and guys and getting that car completely hooked up so Roman could throw down a pole lap like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everything we talk about, every time we talk about things, it's all about execution. We say the reason why we're here is because we've executed every weekend. You don't always have the fastest car, but you make the most of it and you execute. And then when you do have the fastest car, then, the top step was beckoning. So yeah, it was fantastic. Lots of champagne and rum. We just drank that night, but a long way to go still. We've got like 5 races to go. So
yeah. Well, kudos to the entire Heart of Racing Aston Martin team and Aston Martin Racing, and Ian doing a great job leading that team. And congratulations to you and everybody involved. What a great achievement. That's a tough class, my friend. IMSA is not easy.
Yeah, it's by tenths of a second, thousandths sometimes, So just to be ahead of a very stout group of drivers and teams is very gratifying right now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, there was a British Grand Prix. Paul, I'm representing tonight. Do you see here?
Oh, well done.
I've got my shirt,
okay.
GBR,
Well done. Team LH, well done.
Yeah, got
or
the
just team. Or all the English drivers?
Well, just UK, yeah.
Okay.
I'm celebrating Lewis, George, Lando, everybody tonight.
And the British Grand Prix full of fans.
Yes, 140,000 returning fans. There's nothing like, and I agree with Lewis, man. I just nothing quite like seeing all the British fans who love Formula One, know the sport really well, and to watch them all there, excited, cheering for Lewis, for Lando, for George. It's just terrific to see, and really, really happy for the British fans to be able to return. And what a glorious weekend weather-wise. I mean, it was hot, but you remember the big mud fest of the past, right?
A lot worse. We'll take a heat over pouring, driving rain and mud any day, right?
Yeah, right, right. So what a glorious weekend. And I was looking at all those, the glamping tents and all the tents out there, and looked like everybody was having a great time. So kudos to all the British fans for a fantastic British Grand Prix. We have a lot to cover about this weekend because this weekend had a heck of a lot of elements to it, and namely, we'll get into the race and talk about the big, incident at Copse, and we'll talk about that as well. But before I jump in and talk about that, let's talk about the weekend as a whole. And just to recap real quick, you've had a change, the sprint race, which was apparently forbidden to be called a race. I don't, they're confusing it with the real race. And I'm thinking, well, then don't have a sprint race if you're afraid it's going to take the luster off the real race. But they had this the first time we tried the sprint race. So what that meant is on Friday they had qualifying, they had practice session, then they had qualifying, and the qualifying set the grid for the sprint race on Saturday. So Saturday they had another practice session, and then the qualifying race, or the sprint race, sorry. And the results of the sprint race set the grid for the actual British Grand Prix. And so I was watching all of this unfold, just like the rest of you. I didn't head into this with any negative connotations about moving qualifying to Friday. But I think coming out of it, I just want to share my thoughts, Paul, and then get your thoughts on how this weekend went. I think when I think of the qualifying, Lewis, put it on pole for the sprint race with a fantastic qualifying, and did so, knowing that it was thereabouts between Red Bull, and it really revealed itself, and we'll get into this a little bit later, revealed itself that Mercedes had the pace down the long straights. Red Bull had the pace in Sector 2 more downforce, right? Now this will come into play heavily on Saturday and Sunday. But it also showed me that during qualifying, whoever made gains in quali, those gains were pretty much lost in the sprint race. And what I mean by that, anybody who had a bad day during quali, they look at qualification, you could have an off, day and not get it right. And you can be hung out and you could be on pace, out of position, right?
Right.
But when the actual sprint race came around, all those faster cars that may have been out of position pretty much corrected themselves. And by the end of the sprint race, I think Sky said only 4 people really improved their position in the sprint race. It also brought up this element, for me anyway, of this cost-benefit analysis, right? For the teams, how much are they willing to risk? And if you're Gunther Steiner, how much you want to risk and how much can you afford going out there banging wheels and getting super aggressive during a sprint race, knowing those front wings are 100 grand or whatever they are. So you've got to really weigh that cost benefit, even if you're Total Wolf, with Lewis and Valtteri. How much, how aggressive are you going to get during a sprint race to set that grid for the race? So what we ended up seeing is kind of, I think, a logical knock on. You saw this sort of first lap bonanza, and then everybody settles down and just, paddles around for 17 laps and we're done, right?
Yep.
And so I thought that was another thing that kind of came out of this. But what it did do for me anyway, is it did open some avenues about a conversation around mixing the race weekend up a little bit. And I thought it was interesting. Lewis keyed in on this and said, hey, look, I liked the compressed 1 hour go qualifying and then having a race the next day, practice and a race the next day. And he was thinking, maybe we should talk about compressing the overall race weekend to just Saturday and Sunday and compressing it and making it more exciting for the time we're there. He said that would be 23 fewer days at the office for him. It was interesting coming out of the sprint race, F1 super quick to get out ahead of the messaging, with Ross Brawn saying that everyone was praising it on social media. It was a resounding success, and I wouldn't exactly write that on a rock if I was Ross, because I think I looked at, maybe they follow different people than I do, but I was looking at social media and there were a lot of folks scratching their heads, wondering how we might improve on this, or, maybe this just opened up a simple fact that giving free tire choices before the race and before qualifying, maybe that mixed things up enough. I don't know. Regardless, I do think there's room for discussion about how to modify a race weekend, or if we should modify it at all. And my final note before getting your thoughts on this, Paul, was what it did show me ultimately is that while Lewis had better qualifying lap, despite losing out in Sector 2 to Max on Saturday, Max was quicker and he had a good start on that sprint race. Lewis knew he was potentially in trouble, even lamenting, saying that he wished he could have done that start over again. What it told Mercedes is that they absolutely had to get their start and had to get ahead of Max on Sunday in order to win that race. And that's what it revealed in the sprint race versus qualifying.
Yeah, absolutely.
What were your thoughts on the weekend up into the Grand Prix?
Yeah, I mean, more racing is good, I guess, I think people just enjoyed being there on Saturday and seeing a race, whether it was a barn burner or not. I think it was okay. We actually did something similar at the beginning of this year at Daytona, if you remember. We have the Raw, and then we had a qualifying race, which set our grid position for the Daytona 24-hour. And I know our mindset was, no 50-50 moves. You're not going to win or gain a whole lot right now. Protect the car for next weekend. So I don't think it ended up being a super exciting race either. Obviously, with the 24-hour race, your starting position is even less important, right? So it's a little bit of a different avenue. And then we have rolling starts, not standing starts, and standing starts can allow you to jump ahead maybe a bit further, a bit easier, like we saw Alonso on the first lap. Generally, when you got a rolling start, you don't get that jump on people and able to initially get by people in the first two corners, but you can maybe make a couple of places up. So, yeah, I wasn't unexcited about it. I wasn't disappointed in it, but I wasn't super thrilled by the whole thing either. I do like the qualifying format. I don't mind things being compressed a little bit. It was a little weird that they did the qualifying and then did a practice two. I guess I would have thought you'd want to do practice one, practice two, do the qualifying, then you qualify and race, and then race. Seemed a little bit out of order to me. But I guess what that did was, with one practice, it mixes up the actual qualifying, right? But yeah, I think you're right that a faster car is gonna, if there's enough laps in that race for the faster car to correct itself. The only thing, it's more about losing than it is about gaining. And obviously the biggest loser was Perez in that qualifying race. I mean, he lost, you may have said like 4 people gained positions, but Perez lost everything. It destroyed his weekend. So using him as an example, if you're a driver, you're like, okay, I'll push, but I cannot make a mistake. So everyone's going to be driving out there, seeing an opportunity where it arises, but no one's really going to risk everything for a position in that race.
Right. The other thing that was a little difficult for me to follow along, and this is just because it was changed. It's nothing untoward. It's just the change in the format. Is that with that first practice session before qualifying, the first practice session, it was really hard for me to figure out what programs are running when and during those practice sessions. So I wasn't sure. I'm used to the old format where you have the FP1, FP2, and FP3, and you kind of over the years you've figured out what kind of program they're running when they're testing for qualifying, when they're running for the long run race pace and everything. And with that compressed, everybody's excited because it's a compressed, more on track action. I understand all the reasons for that. It was just difficult for me to sort of follow along on the first test session, compressed to an hour, and when were they actually running for quali, which was coming up, versus what were they testing for the race, or what were they testing for the sprint race, and conversely with the second. So it was a little difficult. And I think F1 would do well to figure out what programs are running and when during testing. And that would make it easier for people at home to figure that out.
Well, I think this being one of the first weekend they've done it, I don't think the teams have fully figured it out either.
No.
So this is, everyone's learning as they go along. I think they will, as they always do, come back to a format that really is the best format, and everyone just kind of follows that as we go along. We've got and I'm not picking on him because I know it was the first weekend. It was just hard to follow. I just don't think anyone knows what the best or what everyone's doing right now. They're trying to figure it out. So they will very quickly, and they'll analyze the weekend, see what was the best way to go about it, and to get the car ready for qualifying, and to be prepared for the different tire sets, different tires, etc., fuel loads for the race as well.
I guess what I am saying, Paul, is here I believe is a real opportunity for Amazon Web Services to do one of those really cool graphics about, the teams are running quali simulations now.
Yeah. Oh, it's the yellow light. Oh, what does that mean? They have no idea what it means. Just ignore it. Put it in the bottom right-hand corner and just ignore their graphics, please.
I did appreciate that several laps into the race, they were like Lewis's blistering tires and everybody's blistering tires, and they showed showed Lewis's front right at 90% health in a green, and he was blistering, and it was like, okay.
It was an illusion.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, that's what we thought about Friday and Saturday. Okay, you know what we're going to talk about now, Paul?
Mazepin's race.
The British Grand Prix.
Okay,
let's talk about it. All right. Let's start off with Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton P1, Valtteri Bottas in P3. It all started, as I mentioned, on Friday and then revealed itself on Saturday. Lewis had to get a better start and get ahead of Max before they got through the first lap, or he may be pretty much resigned to second at that point. And that was critical because he didn't get that start, a good start on the sprint race. He tried to overtake Max on the outside of Copse during the sprint race. That didn't work. Note to Lewis Hamilton, right? So he knew, the team knew that if Max got out ahead in the race in sector 2, he was going to pull away, and then pretty much Mercedes was resigned to that. So it was critical for him to get around him. Lewis entered Copse on the inside, diving underneath Max, and the two collided. There was a tremendous amount of discussion and controversy as to if Lewis was truly alongside him. Did Max weave too much before Copse? Whataboutism. And then there was that was sort of Max was weaving a lot, so maybe that was wrong. Bad on him. I didn't see that necessarily leading up to Copse. I thought Max did a pretty good defensive job. Or that Lewis had the right to the corner because his front wheel was halfway up the length of Max's car. Look, here's what the stewards said about the incident. Quote, the stewards reviewed video and telemetry evidence. Cars 33 and 44 entered turn 9 with car 33 in the lead and car 44 slightly behind and on the inside. Car 44 was on a line that did not reach the apex of the corner with room available to the inside, meaning Max left more than car length. He had room to the apex. When car 33 turned into the corner, car 44 did not avoid contact, and the left front of car 44 contacted the right rear of car 33. Car 44 is judged predominantly at fault, end quote. Now, while Toto said it takes two to tango, and Lewis said Max didn't leave him enough space, some were arguing that Lewis's pass on Leclerc at the same corner later on in the race proves that you can pass there, and that Charles did leave him enough room. Well, Charles did because he ran wide, ran off, which is what Max was not going to do.
Correct.
And Charles did, and he paid for it, right? So I thought it was interesting because Jenson Button kind of saying the unpopular thing, saying during the broadcast, that's pretty much Lewis. Yeah, you don't go in there and pull that. He got a 10-second penalty that was given to Lewis. And then after that, he engaged in one of his patented awesome recovery drives to take the win, leaving Gary Anderson, of all people, to say that shows you the penalty was not strong enough. But, Lewis was hooked up. That car is class of the field with Max out and super fast, and he drove back to hunt down Charles Leclerc and take the win. So let's talk about this.
Okay.
Oh, and to add salt to the Red Bull's wound, Toto said that had they not had the red flag, Lewis would have retired the car. But because of the red flag, he was able to repair his car, change a cracked wheel, and he went out and won the race. No. So anyway, so let's talk about this pass, Paul.
Okay.
Up front, my opinion on this is that Lewis is at fault. They went into the corner. Max had chosen his line. By the time they went in, Max was ahead on the outside. All the braking was done, trail braking. They go into the corner. Max picks his line, leaves plenty of room for Lewis on the inside. Lewis would have kissed the apex. He didn't. Took too much rolling speed in there, understeered, tapped Max's wheel. Yes, it is a racing incident. Did Lewis do it on purpose? No. But Lewis was there to say, I'm not going to get pushed and shoved around by Max. We're driving for the championship. It's not going to happen. On conversely, Max says, I'm not here to play wet nurse to Lewis and change my line mid-corner. That's not going to happen. I'm on my line. I've left him room. He's on the inside. And when you're ahead on the outside, I feel like it's incumbent upon the driver on the inside. It's up to you, Tiger. You're going to have to either hit the line and take advantage of the space that Max gave you, or you're not. And in this case, unfortunately, I think it was a misjudgment. Lewis had too much speed, understeered into Max. That's my novice opinion of it because I'm not a professional driver. You are. How did you see it?
Well, before we talk about that,
Yes.
let's talk about what leads up to this
Okay.
situation, right? So, first off, I read some stuff about people saying, well, Max is weaving, and that, so Lewis had every right to do what he did, which they don't, they're disassociated from each other, right? Max was weaving quite a bit in that sprint race. Doesn't give anyone the right to take him out in any race. And I think the way he was fighting the battle with Lewis all the way on this opening lap, which was amazing. I thought it was fantastic driving by both of them. I think was fully within the bounds of the rules and sporting code, right? So I don't think anything Verstappen did there was antagonizing Lewis to just do something that, untoward and take him out of the race. Now, Lewis has, had it pretty good the past few years. And even though from time to time he may have come up against Verstappen, he's never had to fight for a championship against Verstappen. And Lewis has been able to give way a little bit to people because he's had a dominant car.
Sure.
And, he can live to fight another day. He's just protecting the ample points. He just keeps building up to win another championship. And whether he wins every race or doesn't, he's pretty confident he's going to win a championship. And so if Verstappen sneaks one every now and again, it's okay. He's not going to fight it too hard, right? But it's a little different now. Verstappen's in the lead of the championship. Lewis is chasing the championship, not just protecting it. So he's got to be a bit more aggressive and assert his authority a little bit as the 7th-time champion he is. So he's not going to kind of give in to the Verstappen style at this situation. That even if it comes to contact, sometimes you have to make a little contact. Sometimes you even take yourself out of the race to prove a point and to move aside somebody for future races, future dices, and make them think a little bit before they dive in front of you, dive inside of you. It's kind of it. You're kind of earning the respect of the both of them, and we saw it. We've seen it for many years. And I always remember the Senna and Mansell years when Senna first came into F1, and man, there was a number of times those two ended up in the gravel trap together, and it wasn't because they couldn't avoid this situation. It was because they were fighting for their position, their alpha male position on the grid. And
Lewis
in the
got
end,
his elbows out.
Yeah, and Elvis, and he had to. He
has
couldn't
to.
let Verstappen he couldn't back off and let Verstappen take another, position from him and another win from him when Lewis had a shot at doing it. And he was doing everything he could to get by Max as well, right? So, I have nothing against Lewis for trying what he did. I've got nothing against Max for how he was driving on the lap. The main thing we see here is that I think they actually both had every right being where they were, right? So I think on the Red Bull side and the Mercedes side, I think they're both wrong, and they're both obviously fighting from their side, but I think they're both wrong in their evaluation of the incident. When Christian Horner says, well, Lewis knows better, should know better, no one goes inside a Copse. No, he had every right to be where he was in Copse. He had earned his right to be in that position on the inside going into the Copse. And the other side of it, where Mercedes say, well, Lewis had the corner and Verstappen just kind of turned in and didn't have the right to turn in. He absolutely had the right to turn into the corner, turn in where he did, and be where he was. I think the only situation we have here is that obviously when you're coming up to the corner and Verstappen moved over a little bit, and so Lewis's entry into the corner was obviously severely compromised. And we know when we're driving at the limit, if something gets compromised, something gonna have to give, right? So Lewis went in there with the speed that he needed to take in there to get the pass done. Verstappen, held his right to the corner. He knew Lewis was there. It wasn't a surprise. He knew exactly where Lewis was, right? So he gave him the room. There's no way that he turned in to the corner or the apex. He wasn't anywhere near the apex when Max turned in. He was driving to give Lewis enough room. And unfortunately, what happened was Lewis went in with too much speed to actually hold that tighter line that he was able to when he passed Charles Leclerc. And Max couldn't have turned out at that point anyway. Some people are saying, well, he should have given him more room. You're at that speed, you have to cut a certain angle to actually keep the car on, from sliding out. If he had turned in a little later, it would mean he'd have to turn a little more input, and the car was at too much speed, and Max Verstappen would have done a Vettel and spun all the way to the outside. Max was not going to do that.
Or what Leclerc did and went off track and wide.
Yeah, right. I mean, it was a little different because the tires were in a different place at that point. Yeah. I think Charles knew exactly what he could and couldn't get away with at that corner, and he gave it everything he could. So I think what actually happened was they both had the right to be on that piece of asphalt. Unfortunately, what happened was Lewis's speed wasn't able to hold the apex, and the car did slid out legitimately, not Rosberg. Oh, I really turned the wheel and I got a massive understeer. It's like, well, turn the wheel a bit more. I mean, I'm sure you're actually using the front tires at that point, right? We've seen it before where people fake it. I don't think Lewis is faking it. It's a very high speed turn. You can't play those games at that speed, and I really don't think Lewis was doing that.
No.
I think it was Lewis's error. It's up to the passer, right, to make a clean pass. And I think what happened was Lewis had too much speed at that angle to actually hold the apex. The car legitimately understeered out. Max really couldn't have given any more room, and the collision occurred. So that being said, it was Lewis's mistake. He was the passer. He was the one that wasn't able to hold his line. He was the one that instigated contact. And so rightfully so, I think, got the penalty. As I don't think he meant to do it. I don't think it was a takeout of Max to get the maximum points out of the weekend at all. So as I said, both sides, Mercedes, Red Bull, you're both wrong. But thanks for trying, and calling into the stewards and running up to the stewards and making a stake to claim. But ultimately, I think the stewards did make the right decision, and their analysis of the situation was correct. I feel like the penalty probably wasn't severe enough, and maybe that's the outcome thing. That I know we don't want to bet on make a penalty on an outcome, but I know in our GT racing in IMSA, I know Bo Barfield, the first penalty for avoidable contact that does take out another player is a drive-through penalty. That's the minimum you get, and I really think that is the correct penalty in those situations, not just this situation because of the championship implications, but in any situation, if you make an error while trying to pass somebody and you hit them and you knock them off the course, the penalty should be a drive-through penalty, which should be severe enough, no matter what benefit your car has, how much pace it has on the rest of the field to be able to make it all the way back up and win the race. That should never actually be, the penalty should be severe enough that shouldn't happen. So I think the penalty was correctly executed. I think the penalty severity isn't right in this situation or other situations, whether they occurred previously or in the future.
Yeah, because in IMSA, it would have been automatic drive-through.
Yeah, automatic drive-through.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I don't think the penalties, that 5-10 penalty, I don't think that's severe enough for that situation.
Well, they had three options: a 5-second, a 10-second, or a drive-through. And there is, Michael Massey was quick, and we've talked about in the past. You penalize the action, not the outcome, right? But when you allow for three different types, now all of a sudden you're assessing different levels of severity based upon what? Well, part of that is kind of the outcome. But as Michael Massey said, well, we tell the stewards, we're not penalizing the outcome. We penalize the action, and that's what it is. And if that's the case, then maybe, like you said, like IMSA does, look, avoidable contact, you take somebody else to drive through, period.
Yeah, because I think, you could say the outcome was Verstappen winning the barriers, but I think that's part of the action.
Yeah.
Not the outcome is Lewis won the race, right?
Right.
But I think,
right.
I think the action is avoidable contact resulting in a competitor,
in the wall.
in the wall.
Right? Yeah. Look, there's lots of stuff being said online, and I unadvisedly waded into social media, which is like
That is so bad.
the most base behavior. I mean, this is like the bravery of being out of range, right?
Yeah.
And it's just pants on head stupidity going on, and people, oh, Lewis, deliberately, tried to kill. No. Look, Lewis, there was nothing deliberate about purposely trying to take Max out and put him in the wall at 160 miles an hour. That's not how Lewis rolls. There's nothing in his resume that's suggesting that he's out there trying to kill people. That's not what Lewis is doing. And nor is there, all of the racist crap that started being said on it's just, there's no place for that. That's absolutely way out of bounds. Lewis is a hell of a driver. He's a 7-time champ. He went into this. He knew he had to get in front of Max. He's not going to get pushed around by Max because he knows Max is an aggressive driver. That's what I like about Max, but it's also what I like about Lewis. He's an aggressive driver too. Ask Alex Albon. The guy's there to win. He's got he's got that instinct. And so he went in and he overcooked it a little bit. He had too much speed. It understeered. He tapped Max. That's not what he would have preferred, but he had to try to get ahead of him. And you know what they say, Paul.
And if you no longer go for a gap that exists, you're no longer a racing driver.
There you go. There's his mentor.
And Lewis Hamilton's a racing driver. So I think it was,
Yes.
they say it was a racing incident. Yeah, it kind of was.
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
But there was still blame to be paid for it. They were fighting, and they know how important every point is, and Lewis knew how important it was to try to beat Max that day,
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Mercedes knew that, Lewis knew that, and so did Max. So I don't think Max did anything wrong. I think he gave him more than a car's width. I just think Lewis had a little too much speed, understeer, tapped him, took him out. Is it a racing incident? Yeah. First lap, I don't know. At the end of the day, it's a chance. He took it. It didn't pay off. In the end, he won the race. You could argue, well, it did pay off. Well, yeah, I understand that. And to your point, Paul, I think maybe a drive-through would have been more appropriate. But anyway, nothing.
So what do you think about the feedback on all the celebrations? Did Lewis have the right to celebrate as much as he did, considering what?
Yeah, there was certainly a lot of talk about that, and I think I was watching it sort of live, and I think it was quite a while after the race when they were interviewing. He didn't know he was at the hospital.
Yeah,
I don't know that. There's a lot going on. I think Lewis he said, well, look, there's a couple thousand people that worked really hard for this win at Mercedes, and we're going to celebrate the win, Yeah. I kind of think, to be fair, if everything was 180 degrees around, I kind of feel like Red Bull would have celebrated. I don't know.
The thing is, he got a penalty, whether we think the penalty was severe enough. And he still won the race, and
he paid the penalty.
Do you not celebrate? I guess. I mean, he was filled with a lot of emotion, big emotion.
Yeah, and I think
the crowd. You got to think the crowd hasn't been there for 2 years or whatever.
Right.
It's easy to get kind of. It's an emotional crowd. This is high. So.
Yeah, it's a tough call. I don't know. I think I'm not sure that the team were totally aware that Max had gone to the hospital by the time that maybe they were in the middle of celebrating that.
Yeah.
From what they saw, he got out of the car on his own, went to the medical center, seemed to be okay. But having said that, I did see an interview with Dan Ricciardo, and they were interviewing, and Daniel stopped him and said, does anyone have an update on Max? He was worried about Max.
Mm-hmm.
And they told Dan, they said, he's apparently okay, but he took a 51G. And instantly you could see Dan's face. He was like, ooh, no, that's not good. That's not good.
And obviously we saw Max get out. He was not the Max you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
right? I mean, it was a shocker.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, one thing I'm wondering is how is that, Max being fine, no can continue racing. How is this incident going to affect how Max goes about his business from now on? Because I don't think he's had a big hit like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the big hit like that will make you aware how quickly things can go wrong and how close you can be
Yep.
to being hurt, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm not saying it's going to slow him down very much, but it could affect how much Max we see, and maybe for the better for him, where no, I say that he's doing an awesome job, he's getting results. I don't want to think, he's not flying off the road or anything like that, but little things like this do affect your psyche a little bit and change how you go about your racing sometimes, depending on what demeanor you have,
Yeah, it could. My hunch is this is going to be fuel for Max. He's going to be pissed.
Yeah.
In my mind, I think he's got to watch the red mist a little bit.
Right.
And there can be no room for retaliation. He's got a championship to win.
Right.
He can't pull a Seb at Baku and start banging wheels.
Right.
Look, he's got Lewis rattled, clearly.
Yeah.
And so does Red Bull has Mercedes rattled. Just execute. You're quicker, execute.
Yeah.
No driver.
As you say, I hope it doesn't mean retaliation station, because I think, it wasn't that kind of incident. Hopefully, I mean, I know, if you're on one side or the other, you can G each other up and get super excited and start pointing fingers at the other team. But I hope we can just go back to, what we've been having and set this incident aside and don't get too deep in the blame game, so we can still have a fantastic run of the championship.
Yeah, it wasn't like Spain where Nico was in the wrong engine mode, slow. Clearly, Lewis is going to get around, and Nico just ran him off the track.
Right.
That's a little different sort of thing. Or at Austria, where he just didn't really turn and just went to the far end of the track.
Lots of understeer. Well, the wheel's straight, so
yeah. So it's not one of those things. I think it's hard racing. Yeah. Lewis is trying to establish himself. He's getting his elbows out. I don't. The rest of it is a bunch of white noise to me. So no, I hope Max, calms down, realizes, looks at it. It's all head games, man. Winning a championship. He's got to realize he's got Mercedes and Lewis on the back foot. They just continue to execute. They just continue to be quick. There's nothing that Max did in the opening corners of that lap that I thought were untoward. I think Max was putting in some great driving, as was Lewis, trying to get around him. It's just that Lewis, I think, missed the apex, had too much speed, tapped him, and it was unfortunate. But, gosh, F1's history is littered with that, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's how I feel.
Okay.
As for Bottas, well, he got a bad start, lost a position.
What's his name?
VB. Sorry, VB.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that his last name? Bottas?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah, it was like cold on the boards. It said Lewis V1 VB.
That was so bad.
So anyway, he lost a position that had his hand played for him when Lando had that slow stop. So he did manage to allow Lewis pass as a team player, came home in third on the podium. Enough said.
Yep, no championship for you, Bottas.
Right. So let's talk about Ferrari. Charles Leclerc, P2, Carlos Sainz, P6. Look, maybe Ferrari made some upgrades. Maybe the hot weather played well with their tire wear and their operating window. Who knows? But the fact is, we do know that Ferrari reversed their French Grand Prix pace deficit, looked very competitive really all weekend. Leclerc jumped Bottas at the start, had a great start. Then when Max was out and Lewis was kind of riding his car, Charles got around him quickly, got into the lead at the restart, led most of the race. I think he had a great day at the office, even managed some engine mapping issues where he lost a lot of pace, but still ultimately didn't have the pace to keep Lewis behind him. even on fresher tires, came home second place. But that's nothing to sneeze at, Paul, given where they were in France. And I think Charles, had a very measured approach, a measured race, trying everything he could to keep Lewis behind him. Just didn't have it. Got past at Copse, tried to carry a lot of speed into that corner to make it not happen. Couldn't hang on to the corner, ran a little wide, but you can't take that away from Charles. He had a great race.
Yeah, great race, great run for Ferrari in general. And we saw some of that once again. That sprint race is kind of like a picture into what the regular race is going to be like. And even sometimes you can fumble into a good lap, which Charles has been capable of doing, fall back pretty quick. But he actually had pretty good pace in the sprint race and kind of transcended that into the regular race. So I was very impressed by the Ferrari overall. I think it was really, really well done. And Charles just, I mean, they probably could have won it somehow if a couple of things had gone their way a little bit. I mean, he lost some time with the engine map, with the car cutting out, I think 2 or 3 times as the race went on. And that's a loss of time that you can't make up by driving faster when the guy behind you is faster, right? And you're driving as hard as you can. So, maybe Lewis would have got to him later. Maybe he would have just been holding on for the last lap rather than with 3 laps to go. I don't know. And maybe Lewis could have been held up a little bit more. Didn't happen. Everything kind of went, after the incident, went pretty perfect for Lewis.
For sure.
Charge up through the field and taking that penalty and then keep going. So I think they had a shot at it, but in the end, Lewis was just too strong. Charles got the most out of it. Unfortunately for Carlos, he had that pit issue, so he wasn't able to show how strong.
Yeah, I had that slow stop for Carlos. He came back through the field from a tough sprint race. He started 10th, but then he came through the field. He may have been able to get by Dan, but he had that slow stop, as you mentioned. That cost him precious time. And then he got behind Dan. He said just the dirty air coming off that McLaren just made it impossible to get around. He tried like hell to get around him. So, a little hard to take the stuffing out of Carlos. I think he was on the back foot starting down in 10th and then came through and had that slow stop. Had he not had that, I think he would have been up farther ahead of the McLaren, but they're locked in a vicious battle with McLaren, and so for Charles to get ahead of both McLarens, it's a big move for Ferrari this weekend. And I'm not trying to overplay it as a Ferrari fan, but I think it's a good weekend on balance.
Yeah, definitely, and without the slow stop, I think Carlos may have been up for the podium as well. Hard to say. Norris had his own issues as
Norris
well,
did.
Right? So he was slowed down a little bit, but he did a good job. So it is a tooth and nail deal, and it's good to see. I'm sure Zach would like Ferrari just to be, squandering at the back like he did last year, but they're here to fight, and it seems like they're able to react and improve the car. They're not giving up on this season. I think it's really, really important to them to battle and get that 3rd spot in the championship.
Yeah, and with Charles up there ahead of Valtteri, I had visions of Valtteri, running up and down the paddock screaming, "Help me, Tom Cruise!" Just not good.
Yeah.
Let's talk about McLaren. Lando Norris, look, CEO Zach Brown convalescing at home with the COVID, but his 2 drivers delivered a great race on Sunday. Lando got a good start, overtaking Bottas. At one point, I was thinking he got around Bottas, and then that clash with Max, and I thought, well, if Lewis gets a drive-through, I think Lando could win this race. I was thinking at one moment, it was brief, but at a moment,
I think I had the same thought.
Yeah, because I wasn't sure that Ferrari had that pace, and I felt like McLaren did, and I thought, oh man, Lando could pull this sucker out, But as it turns out, he didn't, and it was really. He had that slow pit stop, scuttled his podium aspirations at that point. Very tough for Lando because I think he could have been there. But a 4th place finish moves him ahead of Perez in the Drivers' Championship. Still a good result for Lando. And to be honest with you, coming off of a pretty difficult mental weekend for Lando, getting mugged. For his watch at the Euro Cup, which is just ridiculous. And so, a young guy like that getting beat up and mugged, that's, not easy just to bounce back from. But he came in the weekend, put on a great performance.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Something like that really can play with you, live your whole life, and then all of a sudden that kind of thing happens, can change your
Yeah.
perspective on things for sure.
Yeah.
But Lando's doing the job he's been doing all year long. I mean, just super impressive, and the McLaren is amazing as well. And it's definitely a sword fight with Ferrari all the way to the end. It's going to be that way. So anything these guys can do to claim points off each other is going to be so important. And Norris always seems to be spearheading it for McLaren right now, but luckily he was backed up well by Ricciardo this time, which seems weird to say, right? Ricciardo's being the backup man, but ultimately McLaren have a great car. They had a great car last year, and they built on that, and they're ready for it.
Yeah, well, Dan, had Carlos on his tail for most of the race, and with DRS, so he had to fight, to defend his position. He did so. Dan said he struggled with outright pace, and that ebbed and flowed during the race. Sometimes he had it, sometimes he didn't. So he said he's got more work to do. So yeah, a great result for the team, 4th and 5th, a big points haul for the team in the Constructors' Championship, keeping Ferrari at bay in that fight. But a good result.
For now.
Yes, for now, yes. And, we get very limited portion of Sky's broadcast, so, it was really all Lewis Hamilton, and it was like I said in my race report, Simon almost hurt himself going out of the way anytime they brought it up that George Russell had the whole crowd going crazy. Well, Lewis Hamilton can get the crowd around him, it's like, okay, that was awkward. We're talking about George, and then it came up again. Yeah, like Lewis Hamilton. It was like, George, Simon, chill, all right? It's okay. We can throw a bone to these two British drivers. Yeah. They're becoming heroes to the British fans. Mm-hmm. It's okay, to be.
Yeah, in fact, George's head was bigger on the British Grand Prix poster than Lewis's.
Yeah,
Lando was down the bottom right.
Lando's down the bottom. It's like,
what's that all about?
And I'm kind of like, it's okay to big them up a little bit. The young, toddlers out there love to cheer for Lando and George. Let them, if they're not big Lewis fans, that's okay. Yeah. Lewis has 7 titles and a world of adulation. It's okay to let George and Lando breathe a little bit. And then this guy would say, well, these young and up and comer future stars. Future stars, my butt. Lando's on podiums. George damn near won a race last year. Okay. Yeah. There's no future. They're here. Right. Mm-hmm. So I take a step, but as it was pointed out, I don't get to see the whole broadcast, and thanks for pointing it out, because it did sound like Sky did run some really nice pieces with Lando and George and C4, and so I'm glad to see the British press, because I kind of felt like what limited portion I had, and my gosh, it was a steady drip feed of Lewis adulation. I get it; it's a British crowd, British broadcast, and I get that. I'm okay with that. Because I'm sure the British get a bum full of all of our broadcasts when about one of our superstars. But anyway, I am glad to see Lando and George getting their fair share of the press and stuff, because I think they're both of them just doing a fabulous job.
They certainly are.
Yep. Okay, Alpine, another fabulous job. Fernando Alonso, P7, Esteban Ocon, P9. Fernando was a bit of a character all weekend. Little dipping and weaving during the sprint race there from the wily old veteran, but anyway, he spun on the installation lap. Not exactly what you'd expect from Fernando, but fair play. He ends up managing to deliver a good drive and a defensive driving at a little bit of Alonso train, but even so ends up having one of his good races, delivered points. He didn't even really have that great of a start during the race, but still ends up in P7, a good result for the veteran.
Yeah, I think obviously, he was probably the biggest gainer in the sprint race. Mm-hmm. He had a great sprint race. Obviously, that's Ross Brawn, is probably showing that video to everyone around. See, sprint races are good. Sprint races are good. Look at Alonso.
Look at this excitement.
Yeah, but I mean, it worked for him. As much as it didn't work for Perez, it certainly worked for him. So he made up spaces, probably started further up the grid than maybe he should have, and he made the most of that opportunity and still got a great result and some good points for the team. Be it 7th place is good points for the Alpine team, but unfortunately, it still is. So that's what they need to do.
Yeah, and Esteban seemed to do a little better in new chassis, right?
Yeah, supposedly.
He didn't finish where he started. But he had some flashes of pace and quality. He said he struggled with tire management, but still being manhandled by Alonso at this point.
Yeah, it certainly is, and yeah, they switch the chassis, and whether it's a psychological thing, but honestly, a lot of the times I don't think it is, and they build these cars one by one, and it's not like you got a truckload of chassis out there they're bending through. Right. They're all, bespoke chassis built to the same degree, but there could always be something just that little bit off. And the drivers are super sensitive. Every little part of that car has it's a very defined purpose. And if something's a little bit off, it really is off. And so
as a driver, you're going to feel that.
You're going to feel it, but it's hard to quantify it because it's not like, oh, well, the damper's broken or this or that. Right. Sometimes there's just something in the chassis build that doesn't quite go according to plan.
Yep. Aston Martin, Lance Stroll, P8, Sebastian Vettel, a DNF. Lance showed that the car actually had better race pace than maybe qualifying because he quietly worked his way forward all the way up to 8th place and in the points. A good result for Lance. Yeah. Did so quietly, but I thought he looked very competitive, racy out there battling with Alonso. That's not always easy, and finishing P8. Not a bad race for Lance.
Yeah, no, I mean, he struggled a lot most of the weekend, didn't he?
Yeah, so he did.
You're right. As much as some of the cars struggle with race pace, it seems the Aston Martin team seemed to be pretty decent on that, given half a chance. And Stroll actually made a lot of gains, as you say, unspectacularly maybe, but gains they were, and points that probably wasn't thinking he was going to be able to achieve, he actually got. So good for him.
Yeah, and I think the race pace, it was evidence there. Even Sebastian, I think, looked pretty competitive until he spun at the restart, and that's a shame because I think he looked rather competitive. He did manage to get back on the track and pass both the Haas's, but at that point they retired the car, so there must have been some issues with it. But not a fun moment for Seb, because I think in the hands of Lance and P8 and where Seb was running before he spun at the restart, I think he looked competitive.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. I mean, it was unfortunately, as much as I hope it doesn't break his momentum here, because it was kind of reminiscent of a few mistakes we've seen from Vettel before, where he's kind of spinning on his own mistake while someone's trying to pass him, or he's trying to pass them, not through contact, So we went over that before. So hopefully he can shrug it off. We did see him, picking up trash. I don't know, is that like a punishment? If you spin the car for no good reason, you have to pick up grandstand number D, all the trash. I don't know what was going on with that, but it was a great PR job by the Aston Martin team. But I don't think Vettel was really very happy about picking trash up.
It looked like maybe he was on the losing team on Hell's Kitchen and had to go pick up trash and separate the compost.
Not a good mistake, and move on.
All right, we will. AlphaTauri, Pierre Gasly, P11, Yuki Tsunoda, P10. This looked to be kind of a tough weekend for the team, honestly. And at that point, you were thinking, well, if it's going to be a tough weekend, I'm assuming at least Pierre will get the most out of it. But that's not actually what happened. It was Yuki Tsunoda claiming that final point, not because Pierre really phoned it in. The reason is because he suffered a late puncture. That prompted an additional stop towards the end, I think maybe 5 laps, and then pulled him out of the points. So he fell down the order, unfortunately, for Pierre. And Yuki did a decent job. I mean, he started down to 16th, so making up the 10th and a final point wasn't bad, but difficult weekend, for the team, which is a little surprising given Red Bull's pace there, but nonetheless.
Yeah, it is, right? I mean, the Alpha's been very handy in Gasly's hands for sure, but they definitely seem fairly reserved in their thoughts of how far they were going to go up in the race, and proved to be right. So it is interesting to know how great the Red Bull is versus the AlphaTauri. There's something different there, that the AlphaTauri can perform very highly, but something about this track didn't quite work or transpose from Red Bull to the AlphaTauri chassis for sure.
Yeah, right. Let's see. Next up, Williams. George Russell, P12. Nicholas Latifi, P14. George had a tough start That's a little bit of a recurring theme for George. Not always getting the best start in that Williams. I don't know what it is about the clutch bite point or the Williams in particular, but he's just not quite getting the a good start. So he lost some positions, fought back to 12th where he started, and that's about as much as he could do. Nicholas said it was really hot, difficult to manage the tires out there. Never did seem on par with George, though. And as far as pace, and said that the dirty air played a role as he couldn't get by anyone in the dirty air. But having said that, George did light the crowd up on Friday with his Q3 performance, and the whole crowd just went bananas. I thought that was great.
Yeah, well, we know when we heard the philosophy from the Williams was for it to be a single lap pace car and then try and somehow work it into being a race car, and it's kind of proven the same way, right? I don't know if it's all about the clutch or getting away. Maybe that's an issue too, but it's really not a great car to race with. George has done some amazing things, and kind of made you question that if that's really the case. But I think ultimately, definitely on a track like this, with the high speed, high downforce corners, I think it was really sensitive to other cars, and that's why even if the pace is in the car on its own, George wasn't able to make up any ground at all.
Right. All right, down to Alfa Romeo.
How the that's possible?
I have no idea, Kimi. He was in P15, Antonio Giovinazzi in P13. Antonio said it was a bit of a boring race for him, and he said it's not an easy track to overtake on. He was frustrated because they were ahead of Yuki, and then just couldn't get around, couldn't get past, and then ends up back in P13. So that was a little frustrating for the Italian. Kimi did have a good start. He's, unlike George, he's actually pretty good at those. Was in the points early on and kept Gasly and Perez behind him, but then a late race clash with Perez left him spinning and down in 15th. So not a great race for Alfa.
No, kind of a typical race for Alfa, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think, Kimi's more likely to make some noise than Giovinazzi, but then he got taken. He spun with the battle with Perez, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So that was bad.
Yeah.
That was about it for them.
Yep, it was indeed. Now we're down to Red Bull, all the way down here. Max Verstappen, as we mentioned, a DNF. Perez down in P16.
You like my bass? You like it?
Not really,
I don't
Sergio.
think so.
Spinning in the sprint race pretty much did you in for the British Grand Prix. Max didn't get the start he did on Saturday. And he had to fight really hard to keep Lewis behind him as the two battled for the first 8 corners in some great battles between them. Then Max went off, hit the wall, 51G impact, Paul, but he managed to exit the car under his own power. That was good to see. He was taken to a nearby hospital as precautionary. Then he was released. A tweet from him and with a picture of him and his dad saying that he was okay. And he was cleared, so that's good. Max, furious, said that Lewis was dangerous and it was unsportsmanlike to celebrate, knowing that he was in hospital, which I mentioned earlier. I don't know that Lewis actually did at that time. But Horner said it was unacceptable and looked like a desperate move. He was furious. The team was furious. Look, the heat of the emotion, yes, they were furious. But then the team very cross about, some of the comments made about Lewis online, saying that was completely unacceptable. So, we'll give some time here for things to cool down. We'll see how Red Bull is. If you're Christian, I get it. People are saying, oh, Christian Horner's comments were racist. And look, folks, I will say, when you've got a guy like Max leading the championship and he goes into this corner, and even the stewards agree, I think Lewis was kind of at fault there, but you put your star driver into the wall at 160 miles an hour, 51 Gs. If you're Christian Horner, you're going to be pissed off. You're going to be pissed.
Yeah. Doesn't matter if the guy was yellow, blue, or whatever.
Doesn't matter.
That's just where you go, right?
You're pissed.
And as I said, I think both sides are wrong in their evaluation of it, but we do get it in the heat of the heat of the day. But I don't think there was anything racist about what Christian was saying. He was just mad at another driver,
Yep.
and that's about it. But if you want to make a bigger deal about it, then go for it, I guess. But I think it's unfortunate people have to go that direction so quickly.
Yeah, it's Christian was pissed, Jonathan was pissed, the team, Helmut was pissed, Max is pissed, Max's dad was pissed, the whole team's pissed.
Yeah.
They're upset about it, and so they should be,
Yeah. As I said, I think ultimately it was the more blame was on Lewis, so that's where you're going to send your emotion, and
yeah. You're going to be mad. He's going to think, well, like Alex Albon said, man, this guy's such a sore loser. Albon was pissed when he punted him twice in Brazil and Austria. I get it. But, as we explained earlier, I don't think there was anything untoward. I think Lewis, it was an error, not intentional. He wasn't trying to kill Max. He wasn't trying to punt him and put him in the wall. But I think he was sending a message he's not going to be pushed around either. Lewis is here to win. And he knows Max is aggressive, and guess what? Lewis can be aggressive too.
Yeah, he's going to go for it. So
he's going to go for it.
Yeah.
So there you go. Let's see. Perez started from the pit lane, struggled with the tires, then was disappointed with his own performance, he said. And even though he made it back to the points, the team did box him and use him to nab that point away for fast lap. At
better
least
steal
they had
a point than gain a point, I suppose.
Yeah, right. It wasn't going to be gaining a point, but they absolutely stole it from Lewis. So that worked out well. Let's see. Down to Haas finally. Mick Schumacher P18, Nikita Mazepin. Yeah, baby.
I want it now. What's the matter with those twats down there?
Hey, listen, Mick and Nikita, they had that coming together on Saturday. They managed to keep the temperature cooler on Sunday, but they did race. The pair swapped places over the course of several times over the course of 3 laps, and Nikita, Paul, coming out on top.
What?
Yeah, Nikita beating.
I always said he
Mick.
was going to be something special.
Yeah, keep your eye on that youngster, a future star.
Yeah.
He said it was really hot out there, tough race, as did Mick, and said that they both struggled with the tires a lot.
Is that the first time he's actually beaten?
I think maybe it is. Yeah, if memory serves. Yeah, I think maybe it was. So there you have it. All right, let's give out some awards. First up, Mover of the Race. Woo! Hey, Mover of the Race. Paul, Mover of the Race.
You go
Who'd
first.
I'll go first. I'm going to give it to the whole Copse affair. The whole pass, Lewis, and Max, and everybody irate, and everybody immediately on social media. Boy, that'll learn me to go to social media and read all that crap.
Will learn you, yes. Okay, so my move of the race is the team bosses for their moves on the stewards.
Yeah.
Moving up to let me in the door. I've got something to say.
Banging on that door.
Grabbing
Look,
Perot.
Did you get my emails? Look, I've got the lines drawn. He was alongside, and when you are, it's your corner. No, it's not. Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah. He was lobbying. Christian called Michael Massey. Jonathan called Michael Massey. Mercedes called Michael Massey. Like, hey, look, take it up with the stewards, man.
Takes it good though, man.
He does. He does.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Understood.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah, that's why we're looking into it. But anything else?
Go
talk
order
to
a
the
pizza
stewards.
or
something. We're going to order some pizza later. We can get around chat about it.
I like when Toto called him.
Get down.
And he was like, Michael, I sent you an email. He's like, Toto, I don't look at my emails. I'm busy trying to manage a race here.
As a race, yes.
Yeah, I'm not reading emails during a race, Toto.
But there's one thing. They shouldn't let people in the stewards' room during a race. I get.
Yeah, I don't know what
Toto
the protocol
got in.
is there.
I didn't understand that. Was it he was when the cars were going around, or during the stoppage that they
may have been
Toto
during
wanted
the
to run up
stoppage,
there?
maybe.
But either way, that should be out of bounds, not allowed. Yeah. There's an official way to send messages to and from the teams to the stewards or to the whoever, and they should leave it at that. They shouldn't let these guys bulldoze themselves into.
I don't know if Toto actually got into the steward's room to talk to him, and if he did, I don't know if they let Christian in or Jonathan or whatever in.
Right. But that's just opening a can of worms. You don't want.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you don't want to go down that road.
No.
All right, next up is Donkey of the Race. Oh boy.
We'll do it live.
All right, Paul, Donkey of the Race.
You go first.
Well, we're in sync. I think we both gave it to Vettel, did we not?
I changed my mind.
Oh, look at you go.
After you chatting about Perez, I'm giving it to Perez.
Good idea. That's a good
call. Yeah.
That's a good shout, Paul.
They were both worthy donkeys, but I think Perez, he's in the fastest car. he didn't. He spun it on his own. He couldn't compromise his whole weekend, and then wasn't able to actually
Not good
charge up anywhere significant enough to warrant the team keeping him out there for the points, and they had to pull him in to get a fastest lap just to steal a point. So
maybe it was him running around the paddock saying,
Help me, Tom Cruise!
not good. Not good at all. Yeah, I had Seb spinning it. Yeah, that was not good.
The trash man.
I guess he did try to make it up by picking up trash afterwards. So,
yeah,
yeah,
that really makes up for it.
there you go.
Taking jobs away from the British people.
That's right. What the hell? What's going on there, man?
Yeah.
Come on. All right. The last word is drive of the race. Good God.
Get in there, Lewis.
That's right. Get in there, Lewis. Drive of the race. Paul, who'd you go with?
Chuck the Duck, man.
Me too. I went with Charles too. That was a great
Nearly
race.
winning the race, ran, in a Ferrari that's, the third best car on the grid, if you can even say it is, and getting the most out of it, squeezing every little tenth of a second.
He did.
And against
managing,
adversity is that.
Yeah, managing engine mapping, constantly changing on him, having to, it's like poking an iPad when he's trying to drive at 200 miles an hour. I mean, this is a good drive.
Yep,
hang in there and beat Botus, or I'm sorry, VB.
BB, whoever
VB,
that guy is.
Whatever it is. Yeah. Player number 1. Yeah, player number 2, I guess he would be.
Yeah. Back
so
up.
There you go. All right. Should we answer? Yeah, wingman. That's what I call him. Should we answer some mailbag? Let's do it.
You've got mail.
First up, Pat Goodman says, it was great interest that I perused several sites regarding the 2021 car design. Several of the changes are obvious. Aerodynamic improvements, no sharp corners, blended wings, wheel covers, etc. Seems the most of the gain was with the ground effects and skirts. My question for Paul, and this is a good shout, Pat, because Paul would know, I wouldn't. Paul, is the downforce loss under deceleration more with the old wing aero design or with the massive ground effect tunnels? Stated differently, will braking be later and less with the new design?
I think the braking is going to be earlier, but not less. It's always going to be with less downforce, which is ultimately what they're looking for. It's going to give you less braking ability, but I think in also the cars are actually going to be a little faster in a straight line. Right, so they're going to be at faster speed. They have to brake earlier. They won't quite have as much downforce. So, and that was one of the points of this whole rule change, was to extend the braking zones, which allows you more opportunity to actually outbrake somebody. Right, so I think compounded both ways. I don't think the braking ability is going to be seriously hindered, but I think the actual higher speed on the entry is actually going to force an early braking situation, which is good.
Yeah, I agree. Next up, Matt Allen asked, in Copse Corner, one of those places where let me try this in English. Is Copse Corner one of those places where there's a gentleman's agreement between drivers not to try and move like that one that Lewis did against Max? Watching the replay, it didn't look like Lewis did anything crazy, but in the interview with Tread Kravitz, Christian Horner seemed really upset at Lewis, who has a ton of race experience. Tried that move in that particular high-speed corner. You just don't do that. It's kind of what Christian said. You should have known better. Is that the real issue here? If Max hadn't hit the tires so hard, would it have just been a racing incident?
Well, I think we kind of talked about it a little bit. I think the move was on, absolutely.
Yep.
It just wasn't executed to perfection, and that's what led to the contact. Gentleman's agreement, I'm not sure that exists. Self-preservation sometimes does, but it's not like there's an unwritten rule where everyone's sitting there chatting about, what you do or you don't. But obviously, the higher speed a corner, the more everyone has to be a little bit more aware and look out for themselves and their fellow man, as we talked about last week with the oval racing at 250 miles an hour. You don't move someone up into the wall, right? Yeah. The faster the car is going, the more things go more wrong. So you're always thinking about that stuff, and that's why when you see some of the lower percentage moves, they're not usually in the high speed corners, right? They're usually in a little slower corner where the the aftermath isn't so dire, so to speak. So
Yeah, there's some areas like at Le Mans. There's some areas on that track you may take the move, but at Mulsanne Straight towards the end may not be one of them where you're gonna want to get crazy.
right, You just don't stick your car in a really fast corner when you think someone may or may not see you. I mean, it's sometimes it's better to be wrong and survive the corner than be right and be up against the barrier, right?
Yeah,
I don't
right.
think this applies to the situation
No.
at the Grand Prix, but it does apply in general, especially in the fast corners.
Right. All righty. Well, that is what we think about the British Grand Prix, and that's what our opinion is. But share your opinions. Go to theparcfermé.com. Just share your opinion with decorum and civility.
Very
as
much so.
Always.
Especially this week,
exactly.
right?
Especially this week. My
Please,
gosh.
people.
Yeah. Good grief. I've been called everything this weekend. So, yes, decorum and civility, shall we? Also, if you like the podcast, go over to iTunes, give us a good rating. Somebody opened your door. I think it was a ghost, Paul.
Oh,
Lord. So also, thank you, huge thank you to our Patreon supporters and our new Patreon supporters this week. We would not do this podcast without you, literally. So if you don't support the podcast, please find a Patreon supporter and pat them on the back and tell them thank you, because this podcast wouldn't exist without them. And boy, I guess, Paul, after your big win at Lime Rock, where are you off to next?
Oh, where are we next? Elkhart Lake is our next race.
Love that
It's
track.
we've got a little bit of a break right now. So
Yeah.
like 2-3 weeks, something like that.
All
But it's
right.
been going. But Elkhart Lake's my favorite track in America.
Yeah,
And we're
mine too. I
going
love that
with
track.
the Aston Martin, and I think it should like that track. So I'm hopeful, but as I said, the competition is so stiff, and you just don't know what someone's going to come with, and if they get it more right than us, then we're going to have to fight for it.
With this wins and podiums, Paul, at some point you're going to get on Stroll's radar. He's going to come over.
You think we're going to be
Gotta
invited to
walk
the
in.
Christmas
You got
party?
30 minutes, Paul.
Yeah, 30 minutes, 3 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Impress me. Yeah.
Just
I don't know.
junk and then leave. Yeah. Thanks,
Yeah.
Lawrence.
Yeah. Thank
Just
you.
keep sending the chassis, brother. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, until next week, when we come back to talk about all kinds of F1 nonsense, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Sick Camber, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.